My name is Caleb Leland. I was 17 years old when my father decided my future wasn't mine to have. My youngest son doesn't need college, he said. Then he tore my acceptance letter in half at the dinner table. Not later, not privately, not after a conversation. Right there, in front of my grandmother, my uncle, and my 14-year-old brother. The rip was clean, sharp, final, University of Michigan, partial scholarship, 9 months of secret applications, midnight essays written under a desk lamp, SAT prep books hidden inside plumbing manuals so he wouldn't notice, a guidance counselor who believed I was more than free labor, 9 years of hauling toolboxes before school, 9 years of Saturdays spent under sinks instead of at football games, 9 years of learning how to pass him wrenches before I learned how to drive. And he turned it into confetti on a dinner plate. I thought that was the lowest moment of my life. I was wrong. Within 30 seconds, my grandmother did something that unraveled 20 years of my father's authority, and it started with a piece of paper he didn't know existed. But before I tell you how a single document collapsed the kingdom my father thought he ruled, let me take you back to the house on Cedar Ridge Drive, the house he called his, because the story didn't begin with a torn letter. It began years earlier, in a place where control was mistaken for discipline, where obedience was confused with loyalty, and where the phrase "my house, my rules" was treated like scripture. And what none of us knew at that table that night was that it was never his house at all. Before I take you back to Cedar Ridge Drive and show you what living under my father actually looked like, I want to pause for a second. If this story connects with you, if you've ever had someone try to decide your future for you, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you think. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always read them. I want to know where you're listening from. All right, let me show you the house my father called his kingdom. From the outside, the house on Cedar Ridge Drive looked solid, respectable, 2-story brick, white trim, shutters repainted every other spring. The lawn cut every Saturday at exactly 7:15 a.m. Not because my father enjoyed mowing, because the neighbors needed to see him doing it. Image mattered to Martin Leland. Control mattered more. Inside, the thermostat never rose above 64 degrees in winter. Builds character, he'd say, adjusting it down if anyone touched it. The remote lived permanently on the armrest of his recliner. His chair, his channel, his timing. Dinner was at 6. Not 6:03. Not 5:58. 6. The oak dining table heavy. Carved legs. A dark knot in the wood. Near my seat had been in that house longer than I had. My grandmother bought it 22 years earlier when the place was first furnished. But my father called it his table, just like he called everything else. My house. My rules. I heard that sentence so often it stopped sounding like language and started sounding like weather. Just something you endured. I was 10 the first time he handed me a wrench and told me to crawl under a sink. It was a neighbor's house. Saturday morning. The pipes were old. The space tight. Mildew smell thick in my throat. I didn't know what I was doing. I stripped the fitting. Water sprayed. He didn't yell. He just stared at me with that flat, its steady look that made your lungs forget how to work. You want to be useful, he said. Figure it out. So I figured it out. By 11, I could change a P-trap. By 12, I was soldering copper lines. By 13, I knew how to calculate materials faster than some of his apprentices. School was something that happened between jobs. My routine was simple. The way cages are simple once you stop shaking the bars. 5:30 a.m. Up. 5:45 load tools into the truck. If there was a morning call. 7:30 school. 3:00 straight home. 3:30 back out on service calls or fixing something in the house. Dinner. Homework. If I could stay awake. Bed. No sports. No clubs. No friends over. You've got responsibilities, he'd say. Like I was 30 with a mortgage instead of 17 with a calculus exam. He checked my phone. He checked my backpack. He checked the mailbox every single day, like a prison guard, counting heads. If I lingered after school, he noticed. If I was 10 minutes late, he noticed. If I seemed distracted, he noticed. What he never noticed was that I had stopped calling him dad in my head around the time I turned 15. He became Martin, because fathers guide, wardens supervise. And in that house, I wasn't a son. I was an apprentice he didn't pay. The strange part, for years, I believed it was normal. Until the night he tore up that letter and my grandmother proved that the foundation he'd built his kingdom on wasn't concrete. It was paper. My mother's name was Diane. She had dark hair that refused to stay straight and a laugh that made you feel like you'd just been let in on a private joke. I know that because I was 8 when she died. And those are the details that survived everything else. Breast cancer. Stage 3, when they caught it. Stage 4 by Christmas. She was gone before the tulips she planted along the walkway bloomed again. After the funeral, my father changed. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe grief just burned off whatever softness had been covering the harder parts underneath. The pictures came down first. Every photo of her. Off the walls. Off the refrigerator. Off the mantle. Packed into a box and shoved into the garage behind old paint cans and a broken shop vacuum. I stole one back. A small snapshot from a county fair. She was holding my shoulders. Both of us squinting into the sun. Cotton candy stuck to my sleeve. I kept it tucked inside a physics textbook for years. A secret proof that she had existed. Then the rules tightened. No mentioning mom at dinner. No crying where he could see it. No asking why. When I was 12, I made the mistake of telling him I wanted to design medical devices someday. I'd read about biomedical engineering in the library, and something in my chest had sparked. Your mother had dreams too, he said without looking up from the sink he was repairing. I thought maybe he was about to say something kind. Look where that got her. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. Like cancer was a consequence of ambition. Years later, my grandmother told me something she started to say twice before finishing. Diane had wanted to go back to school. She'd completed 2 years of a nursing program before marrying my father. After I was born, she talked about finishing it. He told her no. It's not practical. Focus on the family. We don't need you chasing ideas. She stayed. My grandmother told me that with her eyes on her hands, like she was watching history replay itself in her palms. And then she said something that stuck. I saw it before. She said quietly. Her husband, my grandfather, had done the same thing. Controlled the money. Controlled the choices. Decided what counted as sensible. She had a teaching certificate. She didn't use it until she was 51. After he died. 15 years of her life waiting for permission. When I looked back at our house on Cedar Ridge Drive, I started to see it differently. The silence wasn't peace. It was obedience. My father didn't scream often. He didn't have to. He set the boundaries. He defined what was realistic. He decided which dreams were foolish. And every woman in his life had paid for it. By the time I was 17, I realized something else. He wasn't just shaping me into a tradesman. He was shaping me into himself. And I wasn't sure which scared me more, losing my future or becoming the man who had stolen my mother's. Here's what my father didn't know. I applied to college. Not proudly. Not openly. Quietly. Strategically. Like I was planning an escape from a building with no visible exits. It started with Mrs. Whitmore. She was in her mid-50s. Sharp eyes behind rectangular glasses. And the kind of woman who noticed things most adults ignored. The way I flinched when someone raised their voice in the hallway. The way I never stayed after school. The way I left at exactly 3:02 every day, like there was a clock wired into my ribs. One afternoon in January of my junior year, she asked me to stay behind. She closed her office door. Caleb, she said, folding her hands on her desk. What do you want to do with your life? No one had ever asked me that. Not seriously. I didn't answer at first because I didn't know how. Wanting things felt dangerous. But eventually I said it. I want to design things that fix people. She didn't laugh. She didn't look confused. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a university brochure. That was the beginning. We did everything in layers of secrecy. SAT prep books borrowed from her shelf and slipped into my backpack beneath plumbing invoices. Essay drafts written during lunch with the blinds half closed. Application fee waivers, she printed and handed to me face down. We used the school's address as the official mailing address because Martin checked the mailbox every day without fail. He'd flip through envelopes like a customs officer inspecting contraband. But I had a backup. My grandmother, one afternoon, from the phone in Mrs. Whitmore's office. I called her. I told her everything. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't panic. Then she said, use my address too. I'll watch for the letters. She said it like she'd been waiting for me to ask. The first acceptance didn't even come to me. It went to her. University of Michigan. Partial scholarship. $14,000 per year. When she called me from her kitchen to tell me, I stepped into an empty stairwell at school and leaned my forehead against the cold cinder block wall. I didn't shout. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. Because it was real. Mrs. Whitmore cried, quiet tears behind her glasses. You earned this, she said. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The numbers were tight, even with the scholarship. I'd need about $9,000. More? The first year. Don't worry about the money, Grandma said when I told her. Just trust me. I didn't understand what she meant by that. Not yet. She told me to bring the letter to Sunday dinner. I'll be there, she said. Bring it. There was something steady in her voice. Something prepared. What I didn't know what made my stomach drop later was that Martin had already been building a different future for me. He'd contacted a contractor friend about bringing me on full-time after graduation, 35 hours a week. No college. No delay. He'd even filled out preliminary paperwork himself. He wasn't just discouraging me. He was sealing the exits, brick by brick, while I was still inside the house. Sunday dinner was at 6, and I brought the letter. Sunday. Shest nicht prav. M. The table was set the way it always was. Martin at the head. Evan to his left. Uncle Daniel across. Grandma Margaret at the far end, closest to the hallway. I noticed something that night I'd never paid attention to before. Grandma always chose the chair closest to the exit. Dinner was pot roast, carrots, mashed potatoes, the kind of meal that made the house smell like stability, the kind of meal that felt like a trap. Martin was in a good mood. That should have been my first warning sign. He clapped Evan on the shoulder, complimented the gravy, even nodded at me once. He thought I'd be starting full-time with his contractor friend in June. His plan was on schedule. Mine was in an envelope under my thigh. I waited until everyone had food, until Martin took his first bite and leaned back. Satisfied. Dad, I said. My voice didn't shake. My hands did. I got accepted to the University of Michigan. Partial scholarship. I slid the envelope toward him. For a second, no one moved. He picked it up slowly, opened it, read every line. His jaw tightened. His face didn't explode into anger. It hardened. He tore the letter in half. The sound was louder than I expected. A clean rip. Then again. 4 pieces. He dropped them on his plate next to the meat and potatoes. My youngest son doesn't need college, he said calmly, not yelling. Worse. Level. Controlled. You're staying right here. You'll start working full-time in June. Evan stared at the table. Uncle Daniel shifted in his seat. Grandma didn't move. Martin leaned back and looked around like a judge, finishing a verdict. Nobody encourages this nonsense, he said. He's got a real job lined up. That's the end of it. I stared at the shredded paper soaking in gravy. 9 months of planning, torn like junk mail. Then, he leaned forward and delivered the line that burned deeper than the rest. Your mother had ideas too. Thought she was going to change the world. He picked up his fork. Look where that got her. The air left the room. He had turned her death into a cautionary tale. Again, I felt it rise in my throat. Grief. Rage. Humiliation. I swallowed it. Because crying meant surrender. And I wasn't surrendering. Martin wasn't finished. He turned to my grandmother. This is your doing, isn't it? Filling his head with fantasies. Grandma Margaret's face remained unreadable. Clear the table. Caleb, Martin said. Reflex kicked in. I stood. 9 years of conditioning had trained my body faster than my brain. My hand was already reaching for his plate when I heard her voice. Sit down. Quiet. Not loud. But immovable. I froze. Martin's eyes snapped to her. Ma, stay out of this. This is my house. My son. My decision. Uncle Daniel cleared his throat. Maybe we should. You don't get a vote. Martin cut him off. Then he turned back to me. And since we're being honest, I called Michigan last week. Tried to withdraw your acceptance myself. My chest tightened. They said they need your signature. He continued. Policy nonsense. He leaned across the table. So you're going to sign the withdrawal form tonight. Right here. That was the real performance. Not just tearing the letter. He wanted me to kill my own future. Publicly. In front of witnesses. I sat back down slowly. Grandma didn't move. I started counting. 1 Mississippi. The refrigerator hummed. 10 Mississippi. Evan stared at the shredded letter, like he could piece it back together with his eyes. 20 Mississippi. Uncle Daniel's grip on his glass turned his knuckles white. 30. Grandma Margaret folded her napkin carefully, placed it beside her plate. She stood, not rushed, not emotional, deliberate. She walked to the coat rack by the front door and lifted her navy wool coat, buttoned it, came back to the table. Martin frowned. Where are you going? Dinner's not over. She looked at him directly. Not through him. Not past him. At him. Pack his bags. Martin laughed. A full laugh. Pack his bags and send him where? With what money? Grandma reached into her handbag and placed a single document on the table. Everything changed in the next 10 seconds. The paper she placed on the table wasn't dramatic. No gold seal. No oversized envelope. Just a certified copy of a property deed. County stamped. Notarized. Filed. At the top. In black ink that hadn't faded in 22 years. Margaret A. Leland, sole owner. Not Martin Leland. Not Martin and Margaret. Not Leland Family Trust. One name. One signature. My grandmother's. The room shifted. Not loudly, but structurally. This house has been in my name since 2001, she said. Her voice didn't shake. I bought it after your father passed. With the life insurance payout and my savings. She looked at Martin steadily. I allowed you to live here rent-free because you were grieving. You had 2 boys who needed stability. She paused, but I never transferred ownership. Not once. There is no deed in your name. No agreement. No promise. Martin's smile didn't disappear all at once. It collapsed in stages. First the corners of his mouth, then his posture, then the certainty in his eyes. That's ridiculous, he said. But the volume was lower now. I've maintained this house for 20 years. I paid utilities. I fixed the roof. I replaced the furnace. You lived here. Grandma corrected calmly. You did not own it. He pushed the deed back toward her. You think a piece of paper scares me. It's not the paper, she replied. It's the law. Uncle Daniel picked it up. Read it carefully. His eyebrows rose. He set it down without a word. And for the first time in my life, I saw him look at my father without fear. So what? Martin snapped. You're going to kick me out. Your own son. I'm giving you a choice. Grandma's chin lifted slightly. Caleb goes to Michigan this fall with my financial support. You support him and continue living here. Her eyes didn't leave his. Or you fight this. And I call my attorney tonight. The air thickened. This wasn't an emotional argument anymore. It was leverage. Martin spread his hands like he was negotiating a contract. You want to drag your own family into court over a college fantasy? He turned to me. Tell her to stop this circus. You want to destroy this family over a school. There it was. The choice he'd forced on every woman in his life. Loyalty or freedom. Family or future. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Grandma reached into her handbag again. This time, she pulled out her phone. Old. Silver. Flip style. She pressed one button. Speaker on. The room was so quiet, I could hear the faint ring. 1, 2. A click. Thomas Hale speaking. Thomas. She said evenly. It's Margaret Leland. Please begin the process we discussed. A pause. Yes. Serve the 30-day notice. Another pause. Tonight. She closed the phone. Martin stared at her. You're bluffing. No. She said. I never bluff. She picked up her handbag. You have 30 days. Or you let my grandson go to college. Then she turned to me. Pack your things. Caleb, you're coming home with me tonight. For the first time in 9 years, my father had no rule to quote. No voluntaries. No authority to lean on. Because the kingdom he thought he ruled had never legally been his. Sit down, Martin said. He stood so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood. You're not going anywhere. I looked at him. Not at the floor. Not at his boots. Not at the wall behind his shoulder. At him. For 9 years. I had learned the angles of submission. The lowered eyes. The neutral tone. The careful breathing. I've been sitting down for 9 years. I said quietly. I'm done. Something in his face flickered. Not rage. Disbelief. I walked upstairs. My room was the smallest in the house. Slanted ceiling. Window that never locked properly. A faint water stain, shaped like a boot near the corner. My backpack was already half packed. Mrs. Whitmore had told me months ago. Keep a go bag ready. Just in case. At the time, I thought she was dramatic. She wasn't. I grabbed it. 2 pairs of jeans. 3 shirts. my SAT prep book, a notebook. Then I opened my physics textbook and pulled out the photograph. Mom at the county fair, her hand on my shoulder. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. Evan was standing in the hallway. His eyes were red. "Are you really leaving?" he asked. I pulled him into a hug. "I'm not leaving you," I said. "I'm leaving this." When I came downstairs, Martin was standing near the door. "If you walk out," he said, voice shaking now, "don't come back." I walked past him. He didn't touch me. Grandma's car was already running. Headlights on. Passenger door open. Uncle Daniel's voice came from behind us. "I'll bring the rest of his things tomorrow." That was the first time I'd ever heard him defy Martin out loud. I got into the car. Didn't look back. As we pulled away, Cedar Ridge Drive shrank behind me. For the first time in 9 years, the air felt like it belonged to me. My grandmother's apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen window that looked out over the parking lot of a laundromat. It smelled like lemon cleaner and lavender soap. It smelled like quiet. She gave me the bed. I told her I'd take the couch. She said. I didn't ask. That first night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, and even though I had left the house, my father's voice hadn't left me. "You're selfish. You're ungrateful. You just destroyed this family." 9 years of repetition doesn't disappear because you change addresses. The call started at 7:15 the next morning. Grandma's phone lit up on the kitchen counter while she buttered toast. She silenced it. It rang again and again. Then he called me. First message soft. "Come home. Soon. We can talk about this." I was upset. Second message sharper. "You're embarrassing yourself. People are asking questions." Third message cold. "If you don't come back by Friday, you're cut off. Phone. Insurance. Everything." He wasn't trying to fix anything. He was trying to reassert control. By Tuesday, the performance moved online. 3 classmates sent me screenshots within an hour. Martin had posted on Facebook, "My son ran off because he thinks he's too good for honest work. He's being manipulated by someone who doesn't understand sacrifice. Please pray for our family. VZ kommer inte call me likes. Decept commands. Stay strong. Martin, kids today don't appreciate hard work. Praying for you. Small towns don't need facts. They need narratives." Within 3 days, the version of events circulating through ours had transformed me into an arrogant teenager who abandoned his grieving father to chase elitist dreams. At school, whispers followed me down hallways. "Is it true you're suing your dad? I heard your grandma kicked him out. My mom says your father's heartbroken." I nodded, kept walking, but every comment landed. Wednesday night, he texted me screenshots of the Facebook comments. Then one line, "See, everyone knows what you're doing is wrong." For about 10 seconds I believed him. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I should go back. Maybe this wasn't worth destroying everything. Then I remembered the shredded letter on a plate, soaked in gravy, and the way he'd used my mother's death as a punchline. That Thursday morning something arrived at his front door, and the story he'd written online began to crack. The process server knocked at 8:12 a.m. His name was Carl. Mid-40s. Gray sedan. Expression permanently neutral. Like he'd trained himself not to absorb other people's disasters. Martin opened the door in work boots and a thermal shirt. Carl handed him the envelope. "Martin Leland. Yes. You've been served. Signature. Exchange. Done." Inside was a 30-day notice to quit. Property 18 Cedar Ridge Drive. Owner Margaret A. Leland. Occupant Martin G. Leland. Under Pennsylvania statute, the owner was revoking permission to reside. Vacate within 30 days or face formal eviction proceedings. It wasn't emotional. It was procedural. And that's what made it terrifying. He called my grandmother immediately. She put him on speaker while I sat at her kitchen table. "You can't do this to your own son," he shouted. "I gave you a choice." She replied calmly, "You made yours." She hung up. He hired a lawyer within the week. Craig Bennett. 40 minutes away. Loud handshake. Aggressive tone. They filed a response claiming implied ownership through maintenance and alleged that my grandmother had verbally promised to transfer the property upon his retirement. There was no such agreement. But Martin wasn't relying on truth. He was relying on intimidation and delay. Then he escalated. He contacted the county's Agency on Aging and reported that his 72-year-old mother was being financially manipulated by a minor. A caseworker came to the apartment on Thursday afternoon. She interviewed Grandma alone for nearly an hour, reviewed the deed, the tax records, the bank statements, the attorney correspondence. "Are you being pressured?" the caseworker asked 3 different ways. "No." My grandmother answered 3 different times. Case closed. No evidence of exploitation. Martin showed up at the apartment that Friday night. And I std pbp. Pounding on the door. "You're going to regret this." The police escorted him off the property. Report filed. Incident number documented. The man who built his authority on intimidation was now being documented. 30 days passed. He did not leave. So Thomas Hale filed for formal eviction in Magisterial District Court. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. The courtroom was small. Fluorescent lights. Wood-paneled walls. 5 benches. No jury. Just a judge. Paper. And witnesses. Martin sat on the left beside Craig Bennett. Dress shirt. Ironed. Caucus. Work boots still scuffed. My grandmother sat on the right beside Thomas Hale. Navy blazer. White blouse. Silver hair pinned neatly. I sat in the front row behind her. Backpack at my feet. Uncle Daniel in the second row. A few familiar faces from town. The Facebook audience had shown up in person. Judge Hernandez entered. 62. Calm. Efficient. "Let's begin." Craig Bennett went first. Martin had maintained the property for 20 years. Paid utilities. Invested sweat equity. Operated under an implied agreement of eventual transfer. Judge Hernandez listened. Took notes. Thomas Hale stood. Presented the deed filed in 2001. Presented 22 years of property tax receipts. Presented the clear title search. "Your Honor," Hale said evenly, "my client is the sole legal owner. There is no lease. No written agreement. No documentation supporting a transfer of ownership. Mr. Leland is, at best, a tenant at will." The notice was properly served. Judge Hernandez turned to my father. "Mr. Leland, what can you provide? Any written documentation supporting your claim?" Martin hesitated. "It was understood." He said, "She's my mother. We didn't need contracts. This court deals in documentation." The judge replied. Silence. Paper shuffling. 60 seconds of quiet review. Then, the court finds that Margaret Leland is the sole legal owner of the property. The eviction is granted. Mr. Leland is ordered to vacate within 15 days. The air changed. Martin stood abruptly. "This is insane," he shouted. The courtroom froze. "She's doing this because of a boy who wants to sit in classrooms instead of learning real work." There it was. The sentence. The moral indictment. Not because of fraud. Not because of property disputes. Not because of misunderstanding. Because I wanted to go to school. Judge Hernandez removed her glasses. "Sit down." "Mr. Leland." He sat. But the damage was done. Every person in that room heard exactly what mattered most to him. Not fairness. Not legality. Control. The hearing ended. Outside in the parking lot. The autumn sun was too bright. Martin stood by his truck. "You took everything from me," he said. My grandmother met his eyes. "I didn't take anything," she replied. "I stopped giving." He drove away without another word. And for the first time, his authority had an expiration date. 3 days after the court ruling. Evan called me from a friend's phone. He was whispering. "I found something," he said. "In Dad's desk. The bottom drawer. The one that stayed locked." Apparently, Martin had left the key in his jacket pocket. Evan opened it. Inside was a manila folder. My name written across the tab. He sent me photos. I sat on Grandma's couch and scrolled. University envelopes. Opened. Flattened. Hidden. Michigan's orientation packet. A financial aid breakdown. 2 other acceptance letters I had never seen: Purdue and Ohio State. Even my SAT score report. All intercepted. All withheld. This hadn't been a dinner table explosion. It had been a campaign. Systematic. Planned. Month after month of quietly rerouting my future into a drawer. At the bottom of the folder was something else. A birthday card. 8 years old. Return address, Chicago. From my Uncle Andrew, my mother's brother. The man Martin told us had moved on and didn't want contact. The card read, "Caleb, your mom would be so proud of the young man you're becoming. I think about you every day. Call me anytime." The postmark was from the year I turned 10. 8 years. Martin hadn't just controlled my labor. He had controlled my relationships, my access, my world. Evan's voice cracked over the phone. I don't want to be like him. Neither did I. And for the first time, I had proof that what happened at that dinner table wasn't impulsive. It was the final act in a long, deliberate effort to keep me small. The night before I left for Michigan orientation, my grandmother brought out a small wooden box. Cedar, worn smooth at the edges, brass clasp gone dull with time. She sat beside me on the edge of her bed and placed it in my hands. I've been keeping this for 9 years, she said quietly. She told me to give it to you when you were ready. Inside was a single envelope, cream-colored, soft from being held too often. My mother's handwriting across the front. For Caleb, when he's ready to fly. My hands weren't steady when I opened it. 2 pages. Blue ink. Lined notebook paper. The writing grew less even toward the end. Some of the smudges weren't mine. She didn't write about cancer. She didn't write about regret. She wrote about me. She wrote about the morning I made her burnt toast when I was 7 and insisted it was artisan. She wrote about the time I memorized constellations from a placemat at a diner and dragged her outside to prove Orion was visible from our yard. She wrote about my laugh. She said it sounded like bells shaken loose from somewhere hidden. And near the bottom, in handwriting that had begun to tilt and thin, she wrote, "Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth, especially not the people who are supposed to love you." I read it once through tears, twice to hear her voice, 3 times because I wasn't ready to put it down. My grandmother was crying too, quietly, the way she always had. She wanted you to have choices, Grandma said. She was afraid she wouldn't see you grow into them. I pressed the letter against my chest. For years, missing my mother had felt like an open wound. That night it felt like direction. Not pain, not revenge. Direction. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. My father hadn't just been fighting a college acceptance. He had been fighting the possibility that I might become someone beyond his reach. The letter didn't make me angry. It made me steady. I folded it carefully and slid it back into the envelope. The next morning, I packed it in my backpack. Right next to the acceptance letter, he couldn't tear up anymore. Here's what happened next. Because feelings matter, but numbers don't lie. Martin vacated the house on Cedar Ridge Drive 8 days before the court-ordered deadline. Not because he agreed with the ruling, because the sheriff's follow-up notice had a date and time attached to it. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment above a tire shop on the south side of town. $820 a month. After 22 years of living for free in a house worth approximately $210,000. That kind of math settles in your bones. He still had his plumbing business, still had his truck, still had work. What he lost wasn't income. It was territory. My grandmother kept the house. She didn't move back in. Instead, she rented it to a young couple with 2 kids and a golden retriever. Imayen, $350 a month. That money went directly into a separate account, labeled Caleb, Education Fund Year 2 and Beyond Practical. Measured. Intentional. Evan stayed with Uncle Daniel during the school year. It wasn't perfect, but Daniel was steady. For the first time in his life, my brother joined a school team. Track. He chose it himself. No one vetoed it. The town's gossip shifted slowly. Truth leaks in small places. People learned about the deed, about the intercepted mail, about the court ruling. No one issued public apologies. But invitations to Martin's version of the story stopped. A casserole showed up at Grandma's apartment one Thursday afternoon from the same neighbor who had once commented praying for you. Martin online. Small towns correct themselves quietly. 2 months into my first semester, my phone rang. Martin, I almost didn't answer. I saw your name on the dean's list, he said. His voice was different, smaller. I looked it up online. Silence. Then your mom would have liked that. It was the first time he'd mentioned her without turning her into a warning. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel forgiveness. I felt distance. Thank you for saying that, I replied. But I'm not ready to talk yet. And for the first time in my life, I hung up first. He didn't lose his son when I left. He lost me the night he tore that letter. The rest was paperwork. Michigan in October smells like leaves and possibility. The campus glows orange and gold. Students move across the quad with backpacks and coffee cups like they've always belonged there. For a long time, I didn't feel like I did. Belong. That word takes practice when you grow up earning your space by being useful. My dorm room was small. Cinder block walls. Shared bathroom down the hall. My roommate, Josh, snored and kept protein powder on every available surface. He also never once asked me what my father did. He asked what I wanted to do. That difference mattered more than I expected. I declared mechanical engineering, not to prove anything, not to escape plumbing, not to defy my father, because I liked building things that worked. On my own terms. Grandma called every Sunday at 7. Like clockwork. We talked about classes, about the tenants in Cedar Ridge, about the weather. She never brought up Martin unless I did. Evan FaceTimed on Wednesdays. His voice was deeper now. He talked about track meets and homework and a counselor he'd chosen to see on his own. Choice. That was the new language in our family. I kept two things on my desk. The photo from the county fair and my mother's letter, inside a clear sleeve so the ink wouldn't fade. Sometimes, when deadlines stacked up and doubt crept in, I'd read the line again. Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth. Here's what I've learned. Silence isn't loyalty. My grandmother stayed silent for years because she loved her son and hoped he'd change. That silence almost cost 2 generations their futures. Power doesn't have to be loud. My father controlled rooms with volume. My grandmother changed my life with paperwork and 6 calm words. Pack his bags. Choose. And leaving isn't giving up. I didn't abandon my family when I walked out with a backpack and a photograph. I left a system designed to keep me small. And the moment I stepped outside it, I started growing. If you're sitting at a table where your dreams get torn in half, I hope you find your Margaret. Or maybe you are someone's Margaret. If you are, don't wait 20 years. This story was created by the Boundaries and Bloodlines team for entertainment purposes only. It is not legal advice and should not be imitated under any circumstances. If this story meant something to you, hit like and subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you're in the middle of your own fight, keep going.